The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop, throwing Cordelia Whitmore against the dusty interior wall as the driver's voice boomed through the prairie wind. Crosswinds Ranch. Missed. End of the line. Cordelia's heart hammered against her ribs as she clutched the worn letter that had brought her across 3 states. This couldn't be right. The ramshackle wooden buildings, sprawling before her, looked nothing like the prosperous cattle operation Ezekiel Hartwell had described in his correspondence. Weathered fences sagged under neglect, and the main house appeared to be held together by prayers and determination alone. "Wait," she called to the retreating driver, but dust clouds already swallowed his wagon hole. A child's giggle echoed from behind a broken gate, and Cordelia turned to see a small figure dart between the shadows of an old barn. Her traveling dress, once pristine navy silk, now bore the marks of her journey dust, wrinkles, and the unmistakable stain of doubt. "Hello," she called, stepping carefully over loose planks. "Is anyone there?" The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard, and somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed mournfully. This was supposed to be her new beginning, her escape from the suffocating expectations of Boston society. Instead, she felt more lost than ever. A door creaked open on the main house's sagging porch, and a tall figure emerged, not the refined gentleman she'd expected, but a man whose broad shoulders strained against a work-worn shirt. His dark hair caught the dying light, and even from this distance, she could see the wariness in his stance. "You lost, ma'am." His voice carried the rough edge of someone unaccustomed to unexpected visitors, especially ones wearing city clothes. Cordelia lifted her chin, drawing on the steel spine her finishing school had tried so hard to soften. "I'm looking for Ezekiel Hartwell. I'm Miss Cordelia Whitmore, his intended bride." The man went perfectly still, his expression shifting from confusion to something she couldn't quite read. Behind him, that same childish giggle bubbled up again, and a small face appeared around the doorframe. Girl no more than 7, with wild auburn curls and eyes bright as summer sky. "Papa Maverick," the child whispered, tugging on the man's sleeve. "Is she the angel Mama told us about in her stories?" Maverick, not Ezekiel. Cordelia's stomach dropped as understanding crashed over her like a cold wave. The driver had brought her to the wrong ranch entirely. "I think there's been a mistake," she began. But the little girl had already broken free from her father's protective hand, and was racing toward Cordelia with arms outstretched. "You came. You really came." The child wrapped thin arms around Cordelia's waist, before she could step back. "I prayed every night since Mama went to heaven, and now God finally sent you to us." Over the girl's head, Cordelia met Maverick's eyes gray, as storm clouds, and filled with a pain so deep it made her chest ache. In that moment, surrounded by the scent of prairie grass and the warmth of a child's desperate hope, she realized her mistake might be the most important thing that had ever happened to her. Maverick Crenshaw gently disentangled his daughter from the bewildered woman, his calloused hands surprisingly tender as they settled on the child's shoulders. "Temperance, honey, this lady isn't," he stopped, meeting Cordelia's eyes with a look that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed facade. "She's got her own life to live." But Temperance shook her head with the fierce certainty only children possess. "No, Papa. Look at her eyes. They're sad like yours, but they're kind like Mama's were. She's supposed to be here." Cordelia knelt to the child's level, her heart squeezing at the hope radiating from that small face. "Sweetheart, I think I was meant to go somewhere else. There's been a confusion with the stagecoach. The Hartwell place is 15 miles north," Maverick said quietly. "But there ain't another coach through these parts for 3 days. 3 days. Cordelia glanced at the lengthening shadows, then back at this unlikely pair, the guarded rancher and his spirited daughter. Something in Maverick's weathered features spoke of recent loss, while Temperance clung to hope with both small fists. "I reckon you could stay here tonight," Maverick continued, though his tone suggested it cost him something to make the offer. "Temperance can share with me, and you can have her room. Won't be fancy like what you're probably used to, but it's clean and safe. I wouldn't want to impose." "You'd be doing us the favor," he interrupted, and something raw flickered across his expression. "This place has been too quiet since ... double quotes, he cleared his throat. "Since we lost my wife Evangeline, 6 months back. Temperance hasn't had a woman's company since the church ladies stopped bringing their sorrels." Temperance tugged on Cordelia's sleeve. "Will you stay for supper? I can make cornbread almost as good as Mama did, and Papa catches the best fish in the whole territory." Looking into those pleading eyes, Cordelia felt the careful walls around her heart begin to crack. She'd spent so many years being the perfect daughter, the dutiful to-be. that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be genuinely needed, rather than simply expected. I suppose 3 days wouldn't hurt, she heard herself say. Temperance whooped with joy, grabbing Cordelia's hand and tugging her toward the house. Come on, I'll show you Mama's flower garden. Papa tried to keep it going, but he says he's got black thumbs instead of green ones. As they walked toward the sagging porch, Maverick fell into step beside them. Fair warning, Miss Whitmore. This isn't the kind of place fine ladies usually find comfortable. We do our own cooking, washing, and mending. Life's simple here, but it's not easy. Cordelia looked around at the humble ranch, the patched fences, the vegetable garden struggling against weeds, the chicken coop that had seen better years. In Boston, she'd lived in a mansion with servants and every conceivable luxury. Yet she'd never felt as alive as she did in this moment, with prairie wind in her hair and a child's laughter ringing in her ears. Maybe simple is exactly what I need, she replied softly. Something shifted in Maverick's gray eyes, a flicker of curiosity, replacing the wariness, as if he was seeing her for the first time, not just as another society lady who'd wandered into his world by accident. Temperance, he called. Show Miss Cordelia where she can freshen up. Then we'll see about that cornbread you promised. The little girl beamed. This is going to be the best 3 days ever. But as Cordelia followed them into the modest house, she couldn't shake the feeling that 3 days might not be nearly enough. The morning sun streamed through gingham curtains as Cordelia woke to the sound of childish laughter and the aroma of coffee brewing. For a moment, she forgot where she was, then memory flooded back, along with an unexpected sense of belonging that made her chest tight. She'd slept better in Temperance's simple bed than she had in months back in Boston. Dressing quickly in her second-best traveling dress, she made her way to the kitchen, following the sounds of domestic chaos. She found Temperance standing on a wooden crate, attempting to flip pancakes while flour dusted every available surface like fresh snow. Oh, the child's face lit up. You're awake. I wanted to make you breakfast, but the pancakes keep getting away from me. Cordelia surveyed the battlefield of the kitchen batter dripping from the ceiling, eggshells scattered across the counter, and what appeared to be half the pantry's contents strewn about in enthusiastic abandon. Where's your papa? She asked, rolling up his sleeves without thinking. Out checking the fence line. He said he'd be back by noon. Temperance's lower lip trembled slightly. I wanted to surprise him with a good breakfast, but everything's going wrong. I'm not as good as Mama was at kitchen things. Something fierce and protective surged in Cordelia's chest. She moved to the stove, gently guiding Temperance aside. Well then, it's lucky I'm here. My finishing school might not have taught me much that's useful, but my grandmother's cook made sure I knew my way around a kitchen before she died. For the next hour, they worked side by side, Cordelia teaching Temperance how to test the griddle's heat with water droplets, how to pour batter in perfect circles, how to know when to flip by watching for bubbles. The little girl soaked up every word like parched earth drinking rain. You're a good teacher, Temperance said solemnly, as they set perfectly golden pancakes on the warming plate. Mama always said the best teachers are the ones who make you feel brave instead of scared. Your mama sounds like she was very wise. She was beautiful too, like you. Temperance studied Cordelia with those unnervingly perceptive eyes. But Papa hasn't looked at her picture on the mantel in weeks. I think it makes his heart hurt too much. Cordelia glanced toward the main room, where she could indeed see a portrait of a lovely woman with Temperance, same bright eyes and wild curls. The ache of loss seemed to permeate the very walls of this house. Grief is like that sometimes, she said carefully. It doesn't mean he loves her memory any less. They were setting the table when Maverick appeared in the doorway, hat in hand and surprise written across his features. His gaze moved from the spotless kitchen to the perfectly set table, then to his daughter's beaming face and Cordelia's flour-dusted apron. Smells like heaven in here, he said quietly. Miss Cordelia taught me about bubbly flipping, Temperance announced proudly. And she knows how to make the coffee strong without making it bitter, just like you like it. Something vulnerable flickered across Maverick's expression as he looked at Cordelia. You didn't have to. I wanted to. The words came out more honestly than she'd intended. It felt good to be useful for something real. He hung his hat on the peg by the door, his movements careful and deliberate. Most ladies from back east would consider this beneath them. Most ladies from back east have never felt as needed as I have in the last 12 hours. Cordelia met his gaze directly. There's something to be said for a place where your hands can actually make a difference. Maverick's eyes lingered on her face as if trying to solve a puzzle. You're not what I expected when I saw that stagecoach yesterday. Neither are you, she replied softly. Temperance looked between them, with the satisfied expression of a child whose plans were proceeding exactly as hoped. Can Miss Cordelia help me feed the chickens after breakfast? I want to show her how Henrietta always tries to steal the corn from the other hens. If Miss Cordelia doesn't mind getting her dress dirty, Maverick said. Cordelia looked down at her already stained traveling dress, then at the hope shining in both pairs of eyes watching her. She thought of her pristine wardrobe back in Boston, of the spotless drawing rooms and orchestrated social calls that had comprised her entire existence. I think this dress has seen enough drawing rooms for one lifetime, she said with a smile that felt more genuine than any she'd worn in years. The afternoon found Cordelia ankle-deep in the garden, her skirts pinned up and her hands black with rich earth. Temperance knelt beside her, carefully transplanting seedlings under Cordelia's patient guidance. Mama planted these beans last spring, the little girl said, her voice holding that particular reverence children reserve for sacred memories. She said they'd come back every year if we took good care of them. Cordelia's throat tightened at the trust implicit in those words. Then we'll make sure they do. They worked in comfortable silence, the prairie wind carrying the scent of wildflowers and distant rain. Cordelia found herself thinking less about her intended destination, and more about the satisfaction of coaxing life from soil, of seeing Temperance confidence bloom with each successfully planted seedling. You're different from the other ladies who've come calling, Temperance observed, brushing dirt from her small hands. Other ladies? Oh yes. Ever since Mama died, lots of ladies from town have been bringing Papa food and making eyes at him. Temperance wrinkled her nose in disgust. Mrs. Abernathy brings burnt biscuits every Sunday and always tells Papa how helpful she'd be around the house. And Miss Prudence, Fletcher keeps hinting about how good she is with children, but she talks to me like I'm stupid. Cordelia felt an unexpected stab of something that might have been jealousy. And what does your Papa think of these visits? He's always polite, but he gets that same look he gets when he's checking the fence for breaks, like he's looking for an escape route. Temperance giggled. Besides, none of them ever want to get their hands dirty. They just sit in the parlor, drinking tea and talking about the weather. Well, weather is a perfectly acceptable topic of conversation, Cordelia said diplomatically, but it's boring. You've already taught me 3 new knots, shown me how to test if the soil is ready for planting, and you didn't even flinch when Henrietta pecked at your fingers. That's much more interesting than talking about clouds. From across the yard came the sound of hammering, where Maverick was repairing the chicken coop. Cordelia found her gaze drawn to the easy competence of his movements, the way his muscles shifted beneath his workshirt. She forced herself to look away, focusing instead on the seedling in her hands. Tell me about your mama, she said gently. Temperance's face lit up. She was the best storyteller in the whole world. Every night she'd make up adventures about a brave princess who could talk to animals and had magic in her fingers that could make anything grow. And she sang while she worked. Papa says that's how he fell in love with her, hearing her singing in her father's general store. She sounds wonderful. She was bad she got sick last winter, and the doctor couldn't make her better. Temperance's voice grew small. Papa tried so hard to take care of everything by himself, but I can tell he's tired and lonely. He doesn't sing anymore. Before Cordelia could respond, a shadow fell across their work. She looked up to find Maverick standing nearby, his expression unreadable. How's the garden coming? He asked, but his eyes were on Cordelia's face rather than their work. Miss Cordelia knows all about plants, Temperance announced proudly. She says these beans will climb all the way to the sky, if we give them something to hold on to. Is that so? There was something in Maverick's tone that made Cordelia's pulse quicken. She stood, suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance, her hair escaping its pins, her dress stained with earth and honest work. In Boston, she would have been mortified. Here, she felt more like herself than she had in years. I had a good teacher, she said simply. My grandmother believed that ladies should understand where their food comes from, even if society disapproved of dirty fingernails. Maverick's gaze lingered on her hands that bore the marks of real work for the first time in her life. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She would have liked it here, Cordelia heard herself say. She always said the best places were the ones where you could see the stars at night and hear the wind in the grass. Something shifted in the air between them, a recognition that went deeper than words. Temperance, with the intuitive wisdom of children, looked from one adult to the other and smiled with quiet satisfaction. Are you going to stay for supper again? She asked hopefully. Papa caught more fish than we can eat, and I want to show you the sunset from the hill behind the house. It's the prettiest thing you ever saw. Cordelia looked at this man and child who had somehow become precious to her in the space of 2 days. Tomorrow, the stagecoach would come, and she would have to choose between duty and this unexpected happiness. "I'd love to see the sunset," she said, and meant it with her whole heart. The evening air carried the promise of rain, as the three of them climbed a gentle slope behind the house. Temperance skipped ahead, pointing out wildflowers and rabbit holes with the enthusiasm of a seasoned guide, while Cordelia and Maverick followed at a more measured pace. "She's been different since you arrived," Maverick said quietly, watching his daughter chase a butterfly through the tall grass. "More like herself before, ... Before her mama died," Cordelia finished gently. He nodded, his jaw working as if the words cost him. "I've been so focused on keeping the ranch running, on making sure she had food and shelter, that I forgot she needed more than that. She needed someone to see her as more than just another chore to manage. You're a good father, Maverick. Anyone can see how much you love her. Love and knowing what to do with it are two different things." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "Miss Cordelia, ... can I ask you something?" The use of her first name sent warmth spiraling through her chest. "Of course. What kind of man lets his bride get sent to the wrong ranch? This Hartwell fellow, what's he thinking? Not coming to collect you himself?" Cordelia's steps faltered. She'd tried not to think about Ezekiel, about the life waiting for her 15 miles north. "He's a practical man. Our arrangement is ... practical. Arrangement." Maverick's voice carried a edge she'd never heard before. "A marriage of convenience." His letters were very clear about his expectations: a wife to manage his household, hostess his business associates, provide him with heirs. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. "In exchange, I would have security, respectability, a position in society, and love." The question was barely above a whisper. Cordelia's laugh held no humor. "Love is a luxury women like me can't afford. My family lost everything when my father's business failed. This marriage would restore our name, provide for my younger sister's futures." They'd reached the crest of the hill, where Temperance waited, with her arms stretched wide to embrace the vast sky. Below them, the ranch spread out like a patchwork quilt, humble, but beautiful in its simplicity. "But what do you want?" Maverick asked, and the intensity in his gray eyes made her heart race. For a moment, Cordelia couldn't speak. No one had ever asked her that question, what she wanted. What would make her happy, rather than what was expected of her. "I want ... She gestured helplessly at the scene before them. "This, to wake up to Temperance laughter, to have dirt under my fingernails from honest work, to feel like I matter for who I am, rather than what I represent." Cordelia. The way he said her name was like a prayer. "Look," Temperance called from the hilltop. "The sunset's starting." They joined her as the sky exploded in ribbons of gold and crimson, painting the prairie in shades of fire. Temperance settled between them on the grass, her small hand finding Cordelia's. "Mama used to say that God painted the sky different every night, so we'd never get tired of seeing beauty," she said softly. "I think she was right." "She was," Maverick agreed, but his eyes weren't on the sunset. They were on Cordelia's face, drinking in her wonder at the display above them. As the first stars appeared, Temperance leaned against Cordelia's shoulder. "I don't want you to go tomorrow," she whispered. "I know you have to, but I wish you could stay forever." Cordelia's arms tightened around the little girl, her heart breaking with the weight of impossible choices. "Oh, sweetheart, ... The stagecoach doesn't have to take you north," Maverick said suddenly. "It could take you back to the train depot instead. Back to your family. But my father's debts would still be there whether you marry for duty or for love." His voice was rough with emotion. "Cordelia, I know I don't have the right to ask, and I know I can't offer you the kind of life you're used to. This ranch barely breaks even, and some years we struggle just to keep food on the table. But, ... But," she whispered, "but I can offer you a home where you're cherished for exactly who you are. A daughter who already loves you like her own mother, and a man who's falling harder for you every time you smile." Temperance sat up straighter. "Papa, are you asking Miss Cordelia to marry us instead?" "I'm asking if she'd consider staying," he said carefully. "Not as an arrangement or a duty, but because she wants to build something real here." The stars wheeled overhead as Cordelia stared at the two faces that had become her world. Tomorrow, duty waited. But tonight, love sat beside her on a hilltop, offering her everything she'd never dared to dream. "I need to think," she whispered. "Of course you do," Maverick said, though his eyes held a flicker of fear. "Take all the time you need." But as they made their way down the hill in the gathering darkness, Cordelia realized her heart had already made its choice. Dawn brought with it the distant rumble of approaching wheels. And Cordelia stood at the kitchen window, watching the stagecoach dust cloud grow larger on the horizon. Her traveling bag sat packed by the door, but her heart felt torn in two. Behind her, Temperance sat at the table pushing eggs around her plate, her usual chatter replaced by sullen silence. Maverick moved through his morning routine with mechanical precision, but she could feel the tension radiating from his broad shoulders. "The driver will expect an answer about where you want to go," he said without looking at her. "North to the Hartwell place, or back to the depot." "I know." Cordelia's voice was barely audible over the thunder of her pulse. She thought of her father's desperate letters, her sister's uncertain futures, the scandal that would follow if she broke her engagement. Then she thought of Temperance's laughter, of the satisfaction of honest work, of the way Maverick looked at her like she was something precious and rare. The stagecoach pulled into the yard with a jangle of harnesses and a cloud of prairie dust. Through the window, Cordelia saw the driver climb down and stretch, clearly preparing for a lengthy stop. "Miss Cordelia," Temperance's voice was small and hopeful. "Will you write me letters, even if you go away?" The question shattered something inside her chest. She turned from the window and knelt beside the little girl's chair, taking those small hands in hers. "Temperance, what would you say if I told you I didn't want to leave?" The child's eyes went wide. "You mean it? You'd really stay?" "I mean that I've never felt more at home anywhere than I have in these 3 days. Your papa and you have shown me what a real family looks like. And her voice broke. "I don't want to give that up for duty to people who see me as a commodity rather than a person." Temperance launched herself into Cordelia's arms with a whoop of joy. "Papa, did you hear? She wants to stay." But Maverick's expression remained guarded. "Cordelia, think about what you're giving up. Your family's security, your position in society, ... My family will manage. They're stronger than they know." She stood, still holding Temperance close. "As for society, ... I think I've had enough of drawing rooms and calling cards to last several lifetimes." A knock at the door interrupted them, and the stagecoach driver's gruff voice called, "Miss Whitmore. Ready to head north to the Hartwell place." Maverick moved toward the door, but Cordelia caught his arm. "Wait." Her heart hammered against her ribs as she met his eyes. "First, I need to know something. Yesterday, when you asked me to consider staying, was that just for Temperance's sake?" The vulnerability in his gray eyes was her answer before he spoke. "Partly, yes. She needs a mother's love." He cupped her face gently in his calloused hands. "But mostly, it was selfish. I need you, Cordelia. I need your laughter, and your kindness, and the way you make everything brighter just by being here. I need your courage, and your gentle hands, and the way you see beauty in simple things. Maverick, I love you," he said simply. "I know it's crazy, we've known each other 3 days, but I love the woman who rolls up her sleeves to help a child make breakfast, who gets dirt under her fingernails in the garden, who asks what I want instead of just assuming. I love your strength and your softness and the way you've brought life back into this house." Tears blurred her vision as she stood on tiptoe to kiss him, pouring all her hope and fear and love into that single moment of contact. He tasted like coffee and morning sunshine, like home. "Miss Whitmore," the driver's voice was more insistent now. Cordelia pulled back, her decision crystallizing like morning frost. "Tell him I'm not going north," she said firmly. "Tell him I'm exactly where I belong." Temperance cheered, dancing around the kitchen table. "We're going to be a real family. Mama was right. God did send you to us." Maverick's arms came around both of them, solid and warm and safe. "Are you sure?" he asked against her hair. "Really sure." Cordelia looked around at the modest kitchen, where she'd found more happiness than in all her years of luxury, at the little girl who'd claimed her heart, at the man who loved her for exactly who she was. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," she whispered. Outside, the stagecoach departed without her, carrying her old life away in a cloud of dust. Inside, her new life was just beginning. 6 months later, the autumn wind carried the scent of apple pie through the Crenshaw ranch house as Cordelia hung the last of the laundry on the line. Her hands, now permanently stained with honest work, smoothed over the simple gold band Maverick had placed there in a ceremony witnessed by half the county. "Mama Cordelia," Temperance's voice rang out across the yard. "Come see what Papa and I built." Mama Cordelia. The title still made her heart swell every time she heard it. She'd never carried a child in her womb, but Temperance was hers in every way that mattered in bedtime stories, and scraped knees tended, in fierce protective love, and quiet moments of shared understanding. She rounded the corner of the house to find her husband and daughter standing proudly beside a new chicken coop. its fresh wood gleaming in the afternoon sun. The old one had finally collapsed under the weight of too many prairie storms, but this one was built to last. "It's beautiful," she said, meaning it. Everything here was built to last. Their love, their family, their commitment to this life they were creating together. "Look inside." Temperance bounced on her toes with excitement. "We have 6 new hens, and a rooster that Papa says will give us babies in the spring." Maverick caught Cordelia's eye over their daughter's head, his smile warm with shared understanding. They'd talked about babies of their own, about brothers and sisters for Temperance. Not as duties or obligations, but as joyful possibilities for their future. "Speaking of babies," Maverick said casually, "I heard from Tom Henderson that Ezekiel Hartwell finally found himself a wife. Some banker's daughter from Denver." Cordelia felt only the faintest pang at the mention of her former intended. "I hope they'll be happy. You don't regret it, giving up that life." She looked around at their home, the kitchen garden thriving under her care, the mended fences standing straight and strong, the warm yellow light spilling from their windows. In the distance, she could see the hill where they'd watched that first sunset together, where Maverick still took her when she needed to see the wide sky and remember how vast the possibilities were. "The only thing I regret," she said softly, "is that it took getting on the wrong stagecoach to find the right life." Temperance had discovered that Henrietta had laid an egg in the new nesting box and was dancing with delight. "Our first egg in the new coop. Mama, can we have it for breakfast tomorrow?" "Of course we can, sweetheart." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting their world in shades of gold, Maverick slipped his arm around Cordelia's waist. She leaned into his warmth, marveling at how perfectly she fit against his side. "Thank you," he murmured into her hair. "For what?" "For taking the wrong stagecoach. For staying. For making us a family." His voice grew thick with emotion. "For teaching me that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places." Temperance ran to join them, her small arms wrapping around both their waists in an impromptu family embrace. "Are we going to watch the sunset from the hill tonight?" "I think that sounds perfect," Cordelia said, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. As they walked toward their special place, Temperance skipping ahead as always, Cordelia reflected on the strange turns of fate that had brought her here. She'd boarded that stagecoach as a dutiful daughter heading toward a loveless but practical marriage. She'd arrived at the wrong destination, dusty and displaced. But sometimes wrong turns led to exactly where you were meant to be. "Look," Temperance called from the hilltop, her arms spread wide to embrace the endless sky. "God's painting us another sunset." And as the prairie sky exploded in ribbons of rose and gold, Cordelia Crenshaw stood between her husband and daughter, surrounded by the vast beauty of the land that had claimed her heart, knowing with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The little girl had been right from the very beginning. God had finally sent her to them. And in return, he'd given her everything she'd never known she needed. A love that grew from the soil of shared dreams. A daughter whose laughter could heal any hurt. And a home where being herself was not just enough, but everything. The wrong stagecoach had delivered her to the right life, and she would spend every remaining sunset grateful for that beautiful mistake.